Welcome dear friends to my video lecture on the last part of Unit 10 of NET education. In this video we are going to talk about barriers and facilitators in inclusive education, attitude, social and educational factors. Then current status and ethical issues of inclusive education in India, the second area. The last one will be the inclusive education in India research trends. In other words, research trends in inclusive education in India. So first area we are going to take up barriers and facilitators in inclusive education, attitude, social and educational factors. Inclusive education emphasizes diversity, equality and the participation of all students, ensuring an environment that welcomes and supports learners of all abilities and backgrounds. Despite its potential, challenges arise, problems arise, primarily due to attitude, social and educational barriers. Identifying and addressing these barriers and leveraging facilitators are crucial for successful inclusion. What are the attitude barriers? Negative attitudes from teachers, administrators or parents often hinder inclusive education. Misconceptions about the abilities of students with disabilities can result in exclusion, low expectations and a lack of effort to adapt teaching methods. Parents may fear their child will not receive adequate attention or resources in an inclusive setting, creating resistance. In other words, parents don't believe in this system of inclusive education. To address this, fostering positive attitudes is essential. Teacher training focused on high expectations for all students and active collaboration between families and schools can shift mindsets towards inclusivity. What are the social barriers? Social exclusion stemming from stigma or lack of awareness often isolates students with disabilities. Peer exclusion and misunderstanding of diversity contribute to emotional distress and hinder learning. Schools must promote a culture of acceptance by raising awareness, encouraging collaborative activities, and implementing peer education programs to reduce ignorance and fear. What are the educational barriers regarding this? Lack of resources, inflexible teaching methods and rigid curricula are significant educational barriers. Limited funding often restricts the availability of specialized materials, support staff and assistive technologies. Traditional teaching approaches may not accommodate diverse learning needs, leaving students with disabilities at a disadvantage. To overcome this, schools should provide teacher training in differentiated instruction, develop individualized education plans, and invest in inclusive teaching strategies. A flexible curriculum that values diversity and promotes essential life skills like collaboration and empathy can enhance learning for all students. Let us talk about the facilitators of inclusive education. Who are the facilitators of inclusive education? Positive attitudes, social support, and appropriate resources are crucial facilitators of inclusive education. Teachers trained in inclusive strategies, parents who support collaborative efforts, and peers who embrace diversity foster an environment where every student thrives. An inclusive curriculum and adequate resources ensure all students participate and benefit. Some of the questions and explanations. What is the main focus of inclusive education? That is valuing diversity and ensuring participation of all students. Inclusive education emphasizes equality and diversity, enabling all learners to engage and succeed. What is a key attitude barrier in inclusive education? That is, teachers believe that some students cannot succeed. It is a negative attitude actually. So it is a key attitude barrier in inclusive education as far as teachers are concerned. Such negative perceptions prevent effective teaching adaptations for diverse learners. How can teacher training support inclusivity? By fostering high expectations for all students. Training helps teachers develop skills to meet diverse needs and challenge all learners positively. What social issue hinders inclusivity? That is exclusion due to ignorance or stigma. That is social issue which hinders inclusivity. Misunderstanding diversity leads to isolation, reducing opportunities for peer interaction. That is interaction among the friends, among the classmates. What is one way to address social barriers? That is to promote awareness and understanding. Awareness programs educate students about diversity, fostering acceptance and inclusion. How do rigid teaching methods act as barriers? Rigid teaching methods. By failing to meet diverse learning needs, rigid teaching methods act as barriers. A one-size-fits-all approach, that is a common approach for all, excludes students requiring specialized strategies. The common approach in education excludes students requiring specialized strategies. What is an effective strategy to overcome educational barriers? That is implementing individualized educational plans, IEPs. That is the effective strategy to overcome educational barriers. IEPs, that is individual educational plans, tailor education or makes education suitable for the individual needs, enhancing participation of all the disabled children. How can schools foster social inclusion? That is by encouraging collaborative activities among peers. Group takes help students understand and accept each other's differences. Group tasks, group activities help students understand and accept each other's differences. What role do resources play in inclusivity? The resources provide tools for accommodating diverse needs. Assistive technologies and support staff enable effective learning for all. Why is a flexible curriculum important? Because it adapts to various learning needs. Flexibility allows a meaningful engagement for students of all abilities. What is a key facilitator for teacher inclusivity? That is training in differentiated instruction. Differentiated teaching meets diverse student needs effectively. How can peer education promote inclusivity? That is by teaching students to value diversity. Peer programs reduce stigma and encourage acceptance. What does an inclusive curriculum emphasize? That is collaboration and empathy. Life skills foster an inclusive environment where all students succeed. What can parents do to support inclusive education? That is to collaborate with the teachers. Active parent-teacher cooperation ensures better learning environments. What role does school culture play in inclusivity? That is promoting respect and mutual collaboration. That is what school culture plays in inclusivity. Promoting respect and mutual collaboration. A positive school culture fosters diversity and inclusion for all students. Now let us talk about the second area, namely current status and ethical issues of inclusive education in India. Inclusive education aims to integrate children of all abilities, physical, intellectual or emotional, into regular schools. In India, this approach has gained importance, but challenges and ethical issues persist. What is the current status in India? Inclusive education has progressed but remains in its developmental phase. Now, there are certain legislation given to this inclusive education in order to promote it. The Right to Education Act, RTE of 2009, mandates free education for children, including those with disabilities up to age 14. India ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with a Disability, CRPD, in 2007, affirming inclusive education as a fundamental right. Then government initiatives, training teachers, creating specialized learning materials and upgrading infrastructure. These should be the initiatives of the government. Then what are the challenges? Implementation is uneven. Urban areas fare better than rural regions. Urban areas get all the facilities, rural areas lack all the physical facilities. That way, implementation is uneven, unequal. Resource shortages also. Trained educators, assistive devices, and accessible infrastructure hinder progress. What are the ethical issues in inclusive education? Teacher training. Many teachers lack the skills to cater to diverse needs, leaving children with disabilities unsupported. Social stigma. Students with disabilities often face bullying and exclusion, affecting their well-being. Then resources deficiency, lack of accessible infrastructure and assistive tools violates educational equity. Then quality of education, inclusion without adequate support results in ineffective learning experiences for children with disabilities. Parental and community awareness, limited awareness, especially in rural areas, restricts active participation. Integration versus inclusion. Merely placing children in regular classrooms is insufficient. True inclusion requires adapted teaching strategies. What could we do? What would we give as concluding remarks? Although India has made progress, ethical concerns and practical challenges impede true inclusivity. The government and society must collaborate to address these issues by improving resources, training, and awareness, ensuring all children receive equitable education. Let us analyze some of the important questions related to this topic. What is the primary goal of inclusive education? Of course, in all the areas this comes. To integrate children with disabilities into regular schools. Inclusion ensures all children access equitable education in the same environment. Which law mandates free education for children with disabilities? That is Right to Education Act, called RTE 2009. This RTE, that is the Right to Education Act 2009, legally guarantees education for all children, including those with disabilities. What international convention emphasizes inclusive education? UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. CRPD it is called. CRPD highlights inclusive education as a right for all children. What is a major challenge in rural areas? That is insufficient infrastructure and resources. Rural schools often lack accessible facilities and trained staff. What ethical issue arises from teacher training deficits? Teachers lack skills to support diverse student needs. Without training, inclusive education becomes ineffective. What results from social stigma in schools? That is isolation and bullying of children with disabilities. Stigma affects mental health and social integration. What resource is crucial for inclusive education? That is accessible infrastructure and assistive devices. These enable children with disabilities to participate equally. What is the ethical issue regarding quality of education? That is varying support for children with disabilities. Lack of adaptation results in inadequate learning experiences. Why is parental involvement important or critical? That is to support learning and advocate for children's rights. Parents ensure children receive necessary support. What is the difference between integration and inclusion? Integration is placement. Inclusion adapts to teaching methods. Inclusion creates an environment where all students thrive. What ethical dilemma often arises? Balancing diverse student needs fairly. Inclusive education requires fairness and equity. What is a significant resource-related challenge? That is nothing but a shortage of trained special educators. Educators with the expertise are critical for inclusion. Very important. What happens without proper classroom support? Children with disabilities may not learn effectively. Without a proper support, classroom support, they cannot learn effectively. So, children with disabilities are required tailored teaching strategies or suitable teaching strategies according to their needs. What is the key ethical concern about infrastructure? That is lack of accessibility for children with disabilities. Poor infrastructure limits participation and equity. What role do communities play? That is, providing social and emotional support. Communities play a great role by providing social and emotional support. Communities foster awareness and inclusivity. The last area will be research trends in the inclusive education in India. Inclusive education in India integrates students with disabilities into mainstream classrooms, promoting equality and social acceptance. The key research areas and challenges are the following. Definition and importance. This is one of the key areas. Inclusive education ensures equal opportunities for all students, fostering respect and reducing stigma. Policy framework. The Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016 and the 86th Constitutional Amendment emphasize inclusive education as a fundamental right. So regarding this also research could be made. One area of research prospects. Then teacher training. Research highlights the need for special education training and assistive technologies to support diverse classrooms. So teacher training is another area for research in inclusive education. Then curriculum development, another area. Flexible student-centered curriculum that accommodate all learners are essential. Infrastructure, another area of our research. Accessibility remains a major challenge, especially in rural areas, due to inadequate resources like ramps and accessible restrooms. Then technology use, that is also one of the important aspects of research in inclusive education. Assistive tools like screen readers, hearing aids are critical, but face issues of affordability and availability. For that sake, research is essential. Community involvement, parental and community engagement enhances support and improves outcomes for students with disabilities. Cultural barriers, negative societal attitudes toward disabilities hinder inclusion, requiring awareness programs to promote acceptance. Then assessment practices, alternative evaluation methods such as individualized assessments are essential to address diverse student needs. And it may be a very good area for research, that is impact on students. Inclusive education improves social skills, empathy and academic outcomes for all students, although it requires adequate support for success. Then challenges, what are the problems involved in inclusive education? That could be another area for research in inclusive education. Key problems include the lack of trained professionals, funding and infrastructure, particularly in underserved areas. Underdeserved areas. Future directions. Research is focusing on enhancing teacher training, leveraging technology and fostering community collaboration to make inclusion sustainable. What concluding remarks we can give? Inclusive education is vital for achieving equity and excellence in education. While challenges persist, continued efforts in policy reform, research and community engagement can pave the way for a more inclusive society. What is inclusive education? Inclusive education ensures equal access to education for all students. Inclusive education integrates students with disabilities into mainstream classrooms to promote equality. Which law emphasizes inclusive education in India? That is the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016. This law highlights the need for accommodating diverse student needs in educational settings. What is a primary challenge in inclusive education? That is lack of trained teachers. Teachers require specific skills and training to support students with disabilities effectively. What is the role of the 86th Constitutional Amendment? It has made education a fundamental right for children aged 6 to 14. That was the role of 86th Constitutional Amendment. Strengthened, this amendment, 86th Amendment, strengthened the legal framework for inclusive education. What is a key aspect of an inclusive curriculum? that is flexibility in content and methods. Inclusive curricula adapt to diverse learning needs and encourage participation. What infrastructure is needed for inclusive education? That is accessible facilities like ramps and elevators. Lack of such infrastructure hinders inclusion, especially in rural areas. How does technology support inclusive education? That is through assisted devices like screen readers. Such tools bridge the gap for students with disabilities, enhancing their participation. Why is community involvement important? Community involvement creates a supportive environment. Engagement of parents and communities improves outcomes for students with disabilities. What societal barriers affects inclusive education? Negative attitudes towards disabilities. That is the societal barrier that affects inclusive education. Awareness programs are needed to fight against prejudice and promote acceptance. What is an alternative assessment method in inclusive education? That is individualized assessments. These methods fairly evaluate students with diverse needs. What is the impact of inclusive education on students without disabilities? It promotes empathy and respect. So students without disabilities see such students and then they are empathetic and respectful towards them. Even though they are disabled, they are able to resonate a good response, a love for them. So that is very important here. That is the impact of inclusive education on students without disabilities. The normal children are able to become empathetic towards such children. Interaction with the diverse peers enhances social skills and understanding. What hinders inclusive education in rural areas? That is lack of resources and trained staff. Resource scarcity limits access to inclusive practices. How can teacher training improve inclusive education? That is by focusing on special education techniques. Proper training equips teachers to handle diverse classroom effectively. What is the future focus for inclusive education research? That is the use of technology and improved teacher training. These areas aim to make inclusion more effective and sustainable. How can societal attitudes toward inclusion be improved? That is through awareness programs. Educating the public about inclusion reduces stigma and promotes acceptance. Thank you very much, dear friends. God bless you abundantly. Kindly, subscribe so that my video gets some value. I hope you understood this. I don't know whether I gave only lecture or through. Of course, this also I have done. I don't know whether I gave only lecture. So God bless you abundantly. Let us meet in other videos. So now we are going for Unit 9. Educational management administration. Maybe I will slightly change the approach. There are 4 parts. I will go through each part, completely one part. It may take maybe 45 minutes or 1 hour, but nevertheless we will get all the basic concepts, basic questions there. And also for the detailed version of all the topics and questions, I will be sending the PDF files within 2 or 3 days. God bless you abundantly. Let us meet in other video lectures.